Everybody take a breather. Now we're getting into the section where I tell you about the tech tools and how you can make these assessments awesome with technology. I am going to be creating some how-to videos to go along with many of these platforms. I'm not going to get you started with all of them right now because I know some of us are experiential learners. We like to dig in on our own, and some of us really like to be step by step and told how to do things. So right now, I'm just going to give you an overview of the tech tools, but I will be uploading and sending out individual tutorials on how to get started with each tool that I talk about as well. So without further ado, mode by mode. First mode is the interpretive mode. My personal favorite way to do assessments in the interpretive mode, especially formative assessments, is through Nearpod. If you've never heard of Nearpod or want to know how to use Nearpod, I've got a session on it from 2 to 5 today, and you are more than welcome to join. Including if you didn't sign up for it, we can still get you that Zoom link, just email. The next one that I really enjoy using is Google Forms. Google Forms is a great way to do interpretive assessments, but it is not a great way to do multiple choice or fill in the blank assessments, especially in world languages. Because Google is smart enough to predict the answers. If you are creating a Google form as a quiz, it will suggest which answer it thinks is right. And if the computer can figure out what answer it thinks is right for fill in the blank and multiple choice, you bet your students can just Google it. So ideally, when we're using Google Forms for interpretive listening and for interpretive reading, we want to leave that more open-ended. Insert the easy button. My easy button speaks Spanish. Así de fácil. This is not me. This is another teacher out of Nevada named Anne-Marie Chase, who has been taking care of all of us during online learning because she has created interpretive quick quizzes or ways to use the interpretive mode in Google Forms. So I'm going to go ahead and show you hers. The links to these are in the bottom. So these interpretive quick quizzes, she has been using for a long time in her classes on paper. And she uses the actual proficiency guidelines. Her school's proficiency levels are aligned with what JCPS's goals are for the end of each year. So this is already set up for us. Originally, she has them as just Google pages for listening and reading that you can print off, but she has also made digital versions in Google Forms. So we'll scroll down. And we have level 1 listening, level 1 reading, all the way through. So with this, it forces you to make a copy. So you don't have to worry about the make a copy thing like we had in that folder earlier. It'll automatically copy to yours. You have the student last name and the student first name. And what I would do if I were doing a listening, this is not actually one I do, it's just the first song I can think of, is you search for the clip that you want students to listen to. If it's a listening, you put it in here. And then students answer questions like, list 6 words you heard and understood in English with their translation. What's the general idea of what you heard? What are some specific details that you understood? And it's very open-ended. It does take more time for teachers to grade, but it cuts down on that cheating concern that a lot of us have, because if 4 students submit the exact same answers to every single question, then you know what happened. It also allows for a lot more student choice. Instead of me assuming that my student should know what a specific word is, because I use that word, so they should know it. They should have picked that up. It gives them the opportunity to show what they did pick up, even if it's not the same as like what I personally find most important. It allows lots and lots of open-ended things. And the reading quiz is very similar. I'm going to pull a level 3 one here so you can see that the questions are slightly different. Señora Chase associates the letter grade with each of these. When I give them to my students, I usually edit it to take the letter grade off so that this focus is on proficiency, but students in my classes are also very aware of what their current proficiency goal is to get the grade that they want. But I talk about the proficiency grade a lot. So what I would do here is I would go to a website to get the reading, Interpretive.com. This is a website that I use. It is very interesting, effective to all student levels. If you use the level 2, 3, and 4, then you're going to get some more advanced questions depending on the level of your students in their language. Can students go back and re-listen to either all or parts? Yes. The video is just on the quiz, so they can listen to it as many times as they need to open, to get the answers. I love that too, because like when I'm doing listening quizzes, listening assessments in class, one student will get everything the first time and one student needs to listen 80 times and the other students are like, oh my God, I can't listen to this voice anymore. This voice is, This gives students the chance to choose to listen as much as they need to. Can students do either all or partial? If you want students to do all in a Google form, you just change each of the answers to required and they will not be able to submit the form without doing it. If your personal goal at the moment is novice mid and you want to make the novice high a challenge question, you can make just some of the questions required. So like novice low and novice mid are required, but novice high is a stretch question to see what you can do. I always make questions like last name and first name required and class period so that I can sort the information later. But those are good questions. Thank you to the people in the chat.
No puedo creer este.
So anyway, I was getting an article. When I give students readings, let's sections. Sections, historias y relatos. The link for Mrs. Chase, again, is in the presentation. So if you made a copy of the presentation, you should be able to get to the link, but I will post it as well. The website I am using to pull the reading from is called Interpretive. It is a Spanish language website out of, here is the Señora Chase site. It's a Spanish language website out of Argentina. And Duffy, I will answer your questions momentarily. Yeah, Interpretive is great because it does do world news. Everything's from around the world, and generally it's pretty accessible articles at the intermediate level. So here, let's do the carnival. Oh, okay. So if I were giving students a reading, I would take a screen capture, however that works on your computer. On Microsoft computers, there's a thing called snipping tool. I'm an Apple and I do Command Control Shift 4. So I take a picture of what I want students to do and for reading. And I save that picture to my desktop, which I did not do this time. Save to desktop. So I have it, I have the text as a file. And then I upload that as an image. So upload, browse, desktop. There we go. Patty asks if it can be differentiated. Absolutely. There are two ways you could do that. You could insert a reading and a listening both and just change it to level 3 interpretive assessment, change the title to whatever you need. You could also, if there are some students you know want to do a reading and some students you know want to do a listening, you could send the individual student that particular task. So here, I have not previewed this video at all, so I don't know if it's school appropriate. You would definitely preview videos before assigning it to students, but that looks good. So I have a text and a video about the exact same topic. So they are available if you wanted to create your own video or of you reading the text. If some students need it auditory as well for their IEPs, you could also just do a video or do a recording video or just audio, upload that to YouTube and then insert it here because you can use the YouTube link as well as searching YouTube. So those are options within these quick quizzes. Again, they are open-ended, which I find very useful for getting student feedback. I struggle to making the form work for me. Do you allow multiple edits by students? How do you give feedback for questions? All right. I usually allow multiple edits for students if it's a formative task. If it's a summative task, I do not. And there is a quizzes button for giving feedback. So if you are making this a quiz or a summative assessment, you can turn, I'm going to show you all where I did that again. I went to the settings wheel, went to quizzes, and went to make this a quiz. That assigns point values to question. It allows for auto grading, but that doesn't really work with long answers. What it does, however, allow you to do is provide feedback. So if you're wanting to give students feedback on their individual answers, turning your Google form into a quiz will allow for that feedback. MTSS here in JCPS actually used this on a lot of their PDs last week. They did all of their PDs through Google Forms where they input a video. You as the participant had to do some tasks, answer some questions, and submit it as a quiz. And then they sent you feedback back to get your PD credit. It was cool. Great use of this particular technology. And you can assign point values as you see fit, etc. So when I save it as quiz, you can see what's going on. I can have an answer key if I want to, or when someone submits it, I'll be able to do feedback through the responses section. All right, the next major tool, and I'm going to stay over here for this one, is Google Slides. Google Slides is a great way to make manipulatives for those of you who are in early childhood, early ESL classes, elementary, and students don't have as many reading skills yet. One way you can do assessments is for listening. So I have a video. I would play the video for students. I did not link the video on here, but this is a manipulative. And if I shared this with students and made a copy for each student, they could match up what each person wanted to do. So like the people are talking about what they do on the weekend. They've listened to the video and then it's drag and drop. In the links below, and I will put this in the chat as well, there's a tutorial on different kinds of manipulative slides and how to make the manipulative slides. Another thing that you can do with them is to make it clear what you want students to drag and drop. I know this is going to make it smaller, but it is what it is. A lot of teachers, there we go. A lot of teachers will actually start with the things that you want to drop into the slide outside. And then students can manipulate it by taking it inside where it goes. You can do this with matching vocabulary, but again, it's great for visuals. Also, if you or your school give the Apple proficiency assessments for languages, this is exactly the kind of activities that students have to do in those. So if you are working on getting students proficiency scores that way, this would be a very simple, similar task for them. All right, the last thing I want to sadly talk about is interpretive mode is we cannot use Edpuzzle. I have heard lots of people be like, Edpuzzle is amazing, and it is. You're right, Edpuzzle is amazing. I love using Edpuzzle, but Edpuzzle has only been approved for adult use at this time. So please, 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 don't use Edpuzzle. Hi, future me again. I wanted to introduce you to a new feature that Nearpod released after I gave this session, which is video. So Nearpod now has a video feature that works almost exactly like Edpuzzle, which is convenient because in JCPS we can use Nearpod, but not Edpuzzle. So to use the Nearpod video feature, you hit the video button when you're creating a lesson. And you can choose from the Nearpod video library, YouTube, or upload your own video. I'm going to go to YouTube. Zamba Memoria. Alright, so I have this great little Zamba video that I want to use with my students. I'm selecting it. Hitting save at the bottom. And now I can go in, scoot through the video, and wherever in the video I want to add an activity, I can add either an open-ended question or a multiple choice question. So for those of us who are very used to using Edpuzzle, we now have a workaround. Thanks. Erica, you bring up a great point on the cheating thing. Send a screenshot or a snap on an Insta. You're right. You could do more complicated slides that way. You could, I would probably use the slides and the manipulative drag and drop more for formative assessments and for younger learners who need that kind of manipulative instead of a screenshot. I probably would not use the Google Slides as a summative assessment tool, just given my context. But depending on your context, different options will work better for you. All right, interpersonal mode. Usually I want to use Google Meet and the time that I have meeting with students face-to-face for my interpersonal mode with students. Just because interpersonal is best done when it's actually interpersonal, not a recording and responding to it. It's most natural that way, best practice. It gets me more time getting to know my students, and C, it's easier to grade on the spot. So I prefer to do my interpersonal assessments in the Google Meet. One way a lot of teachers are doing that is if you have 50 minutes assigned with you and your students, and you have 30 students, you divide that 50 minutes into 10-minute slots, divide your class also by 6, or sorry, 50 also by 5, so you have 6 students per 10-minute slot, and you have students sign up for their 10-minute conversation time with their teacher and each other. And that way it's a smaller group working on interpersonal skills and easier to assess. I have been using the talk rubric, which again is from ACTFL, and it's in the ACTFL Keys to Planning for Learning, which assesses students on target language use, accuracy on specific structures, so making sure they're actually talking about what we talked about this unit, Listening and responding appropriately to peers, and kindness and being an equal and inclusive conversation partner. And I do not weight those categories evenly. They go in descending order. So the target language use is the biggest category for me. And that's per the JCPS rubric that's based on actual and Apple standards. And then accuracy on specific structures. I'm not talking about did they always use present tense exactly correctly in this case. It's more, we've been talking about likes and dislikes. Are students really focusing on using the vocabulary of likes and dislikes, or are they just saying me gusta, I like, over and over and over and over again, and not showing a variety of structure? So maybe more like, instead of accuracy on specific structures, I look on as much inclusion of a variety of skills that we've been working on lately. Listening and responding appropriately gets towards intercultural skills. Not very far, but it approaches that. And then just kindness, not being a jerk face, being able to have a conversation where everyone is involved. And that keeps, knowing that that's part of the grade, keeps students from talking over each other, so it's easier to assess multiple students at the same time. The higher level your students, the easier it is to do a big group, I have found. I usually can assess about 10 of my Spanish 4 students at one time, because they can run the conversation on their own, whereas my Spanish 2 students, the smaller the group, the better. And then Nearpod is also possible for interpersonal mode. And again, I'll talk about that during the Nearpod training this afternoon. However, it's not your best bet. The giant question mark is over Flipgrid, because jcps.me has very conflicting information on what it says. It says Flipgrid is not approved, so I'm choosing not to use it. But it also says that we can use Flipgrid so long as we have the consent form filled out, but I don't know where the consent form is. And I think I've talked to Eli about getting clarity on that. The sooner the better, because if you are working on speaking and don't want to do it all synchronously, Flipgrid is the best technological answer that I know. A lot of people use things like Voki, Voicemeeter, and several other tools as well. I have not checked on their approval. Again, go to jcps.me/software if there is a tool that you would like to be able to use and want to see if JCPS has approved it. All right, the last round is presentational mode. And when we talk about presentational mode, there's a difference between on-demand presentations and polished presentations. On-demand is what most of us use in our classrooms, where we expect students to have studied, they need to come in, they need to have this prepared, and they need to do the best they can on the task that we give them to write or to say out loud. Very often, there's not a lot of revision after that. Teachers, we usually give feedback, but there isn't regularly drafting, things like that. In order to take our performance assessments up to that JCPS backpack level, I recommend starting with an on-demand type writing and then moving into a polished, revised, several phases in, and professionally formatted writing. In my classroom, and I think I mentioned this earlier, a lot of times I'll have students do an on-demand writing and that becomes their first draft. So what they could do in class on test day is the first draft for their JCPS backpack piece. It's the sum of the unit, it's very clearly connected, summative assessment, and they know coming in that yes, they're getting a mastery grade for what they do right here, but they will also get graded on the final draft, and that will be another smaller mastery grade as well. So when I'm doing on-demand writing, I use Google Docs. And I am going to show you my favorite trick in Google Docs. I am going to go back to Krishna's uses of energy to show you all this. When you have a student piece of work open in Google Docs or any Google product, Google Sheets, Google Slides, etc., you can go to File, Version History, and see Version History. And you can identify each, that's when Krishna created his page, and this is as he starts adding things. You can see each edit a student made. If suddenly, like, changed the role is for a student, not a teacher, so he changed the role. Very sensible. So you can see every edit a student makes. If you go into this version history and there's only one edit that was made and the entirety of the block of text shows up all at once in the target language, they probably used a translator and copy pasted it. I screenshot that version history, and when I ask students to redo their task, and when I contact their parents about them not providing original work, I include that screenshot. It's like, it is clear that this was not done on their own in this Google document. During NTI, any extended writing that we do, I am requiring students to submit on Google Docs. Yes, they could do it on paper, but I have a group of students every year that will go to Google Translate, we'll translate it all, and then we'll write it out by hand after that and then upload that picture so I can't catch them. Except through the very obvious, they're using advanced antiquated structures that only people in one region of Spain use when they're really old. And these are 15-year-olds that are in Spanish 1. Yeah. So the version history is really good for proof, for talking to parents and students about what is original work, how does this work. I also allow my students to use no more than 10% of their writing be looked up, because sometimes we do need to know structures. I did my master's in Spanish and I wrote a 25-page paper in Spanish and I had to look up some words. Even though I'm not totally fluent, I'm not a native Spanish speaker, but when I've been making these presentations, sometimes I have to use an English thesaurus because words, I forget them in my native language. You are very lucky that Google Translate doesn't work for Nepali language, or terrible. Like, it could be a bad thing depending on the situation. Google Translate at this point works really well for Spanish. It does. I'm not denying it. It's not a piece of junk. Some less commonly spoken, less commonly taught languages, it does continue to be very obvious. However, for me in my Spanish teaching world, Spanish to English Google Translate is spot on. And so I say to students, if they've used any translator, and I encourage them to use a dictionary like Word Reference instead, but if they've had to look something up, that's okay. They need to highlight it, underline it, capitalize it, so I know what's their original work and what's not. And in early levels, it is so easy to tell what's going on. When I'm teaching my Spanish 4s, it's harder to tell. It gets harder as you go. So yes, use your professional judgment, but there's also a way to go back and say, listen, here's the proof. Also, a lot of times if students copy and paste from Google Translate specifically, the text gets this like weird highlighted background shade. And sometimes it gets a little shield at the bottom. And you can use those things as proof. Sometimes me as the teacher saying, listen, I can tell you're in Spanish 1 and you're using pluscuamperfecto is just, it's too much. But that's not enough when you can't prove it. Version history definitely helps with that kind of proof if you're having to be in that situation with students or parents. When I want to polish student work, these are my 3 favorite sites and one thing I hope to do in the future. So I'm going to start with video, just because video is any video. Students can record a video on their phone and upload it to YouTube privately, or they can just send you the file directly from their phone. Or if their parents already allow them to have TikTok or Instagram accounts, they can download their videos from TikTok and Instagram and just send it to you without you as the teacher needing to have an account, and without having to be friends with them, even if you do. I have an Instagram account. My students are not allowed there. I do not have a TikTok account. I will not have a TikTok account, but I receive lots and lots of videos from TikTok in student projects because they're familiar with the platform. They like it. So when I open it up as an option, they do it. And then I have some students say, I don't have TikTok. I'm like, it's okay. You don't need to make a TikTok video. You can make your own video. If you as a teacher do not want the security issues of TikTok, but want to make a TikTok-like video, there is an app called Cliptomatic. Yeah. It costs money. I think it's $5. But you can make TikTok-like videos without the security issues of TikTok. I would not ask students to do that just because it costs money, but it's there. And that's how I do presentational speaking. I'm also playing around with getting students to do a podcast. I have done those in the physical classroom before. I haven't figured out how to do them online yet. Hopefully soon. So the other two places I wanted to show you are Canva. Canva is a graphics making website, and all of these pretty slides that I made in the Google Slides, I did not make in Google, I made in Canva because they have better templates. They look much nicer. Canva initial accounts are free. Teachers can get a free pro account. You have to fill out an application and just search Google for the Canva educator application. You have to already have an account first. And there are lots of formats. So you can see you can do presentations, you can do postcards, Instagram posts. I've had students, I didn't want them to actually make an Instagram, but they were able to send me a series of posts like they would put on Instagram without opening them up to that security risk. You can make infographics, posters. I know at least a couple of you I saw when you were making your rafts and scraps and grasps that you were guiding students to make posters. This is a great place to make a poster. You can even do some basic video, which is nice. So back here, let's go with that poster. And like I said, I will be making a more detailed startup video for this later. This is the very, very quick run through. I selected that I wanted to make a poster. I can choose a template to make already. So if I were making a poster about a celebration, I could search for party. And there are all kinds of party templates available. Let's look for New Year's. Great, that's something I teach about. So I get this nice little New Year's background. It already looks professional and I haven't done any work yet. You can add photos. There are photos already embedded in. So if you wanted to add grapes, and those of you who are Spanish teachers definitely understand why I would add grapes to a New Year's thing. I don't know if anybody else would. So we've got grapes because that's part of New Year, and the color red is really popular. So maybe I want to add this. Oh, but that picture is really big. Actually, that's dirty. Let's not add that one. There we go. That one looks fine. But that picture is really big. I want it to be smaller. So what I'm going to do is come over here to Elements. And Frames. And there are all these different kinds of frames. So if I want her just to be in a circle, I can drag her into the frame, and now that picture is in a circle, and it looks all fancy and professional, and I didn't have to do very much work, and I can move everything around, add text, upload my own photos. So this is where I uploaded all of those raft and scraps and things, ideas. Text. They have things to make your text look fancy and pretty, already done for you, or you can just add regular text. It's a great way to do professional stuff, make things look, yes, can this be saved to Google Drive and put in a Google slide? Yes. Yes. It's my favorite part. So that is literally what I did to do the presentation I gave you all today. I built my slides over here in Canva, and then I went to download, and I downloaded them as individual images, so as PNGs. I downloaded all of them, and then I was just able to insert all of those into my Google Slides, add a couple things like this activity, add my presenter notes. For you as a teacher, other ways you might want to use Canva and some other examples I have. I know the Bitmoji classroom is a really big thing, and thanks to Carol Fields, who is in here right now, I have designed my own Bitmoji classroom. She convinced me, and I was able to do this all on Canva. I uploaded a picture of my cat, all of my cats. Where's my cat pictures? There we go. So this was the original picture. What's great is I don't want that background there. I can just take the background off. And it takes a second, but it auto detects the background. And suddenly there's just a cat on its own. It's great. It's easy. It makes things look professional really quickly. Leave. I also make all of my own classroom posters because I've not found posters that are exactly the way I want. So I found it pretty easy to make them in here. These are the Sweet 16 verbs. My classroom is video game themed. So it made sense to have video games and video game fonts for what I wanted. I've made fancy syllabi in here so students can make documents the way they want. Mine ended up looking like an infographic, but again, everything's video game themed. So my syllabus was video game themed. I'm one of those extra teachers who definitely wants everything to look cute. I made posts for my Google site, which I'm about to get to. There's just so many things. I made postcards for my students while we were out. I've made Google Classroom headers. Lots of ways to make things look professional in context with Canva. I also use Canva in conjunction with Google Sites, where I will have graphics inside my Google Sites. Google Sites is another tool that's part of the Google Suite that we have access to in JCPS. Most of us as JCPS teachers are very familiar with Google Docs, Google Slides, and maybe Google Sheets. And then we're like, oh yeah, and Google Forms, we do that too. But if you keep going down, we have Google Sites. Google Sites is a website builder. Students have access to this, teachers have access to this. You do not have to be a computer wizard to be able to do this awesomely. In fact, it even says at the bottom down here, unsure where to begin? Try a template. So I didn't click the templates fast enough. That's okay. Here are just basic features. Your web page title. I'm gonna make a website about so my students had this where they had to make a welcome to Louisville website for new Hispanic people from the Hispanic world who have recently moved to Louisville. So they did Bienvenidos a Louisville. And we added a few different pages to that. So you go to pages, you have plus, new page. We had comida, food. We had educación, schools. We had diversión, fun stuff to do around Louisville. And so each student group was assigned a different one of these. We built this as a class. Students can build individual websites as well. And everything's drag and drop. So if I want a picture with text, I just click over here, the picture with text. I can add a picture. A really great Louisville Hispanic food restaurant that I eat at all the time I'm gonna search in Drive. Guacamole restaurant. Aw, that's not searching in Drive. I should be searching online, not search Drive. Google image search. Yeah, let's do Havana Roomba. Okay, we've got a picture of what might be Havana Roomba. I don't think it is actually, but we're gonna insert that image. It puts the picture in. Havana Roomba. I'm writing things in Spanish. I would have my students be doing this in the target language, but it's as quick as that. You want a divider in between two sections? You hit the divider button. You want to add a YouTube video? You add a YouTube video. Okay. There we go. People talking about it. You can add a map. Really, anything. And it's all just right there and clickable. You do not have to be super technological to be able to do this. And you can embed your own slides, your docs, your sheets, your forms, anything that you've done within Google already, you can embed into this site. Building a website is definitely a 21st century skill. It's something that students should be able to feel confident doing. And using Google Sites, it's easy to feel confident doing it. They can change the themes. They can add whatever they want. I like green, so I'm making it green. Everything's already built in here to make a professional product without having to spend weeks teaching students how to build a website or spending a lot of time teaching someone how to use the tool. Which is why I presented these particular tools. I and my students, we've used these, I've used all of these with students for several years now. Canva, Google Sites, making videos, all of that I have used with students for many years at this point. And students find these particular platforms very intuitive. With a lot of the drag and drop stuff, you could probably even still use it with upper elementary school. I made my NTI website, if you want to see an example of like a fleshed out website, when we had to give students a see if I can find mine. Nope. Sexton's NTI page. Here we go. So here's a fleshed out website that I built when we had to put all of a link to our classroom or what we were doing in a document. I built a website and then I was able to update it as we went. I added my own background. I put a welcome back video for my students. I teach 3 classes, so each class period could click on themselves down here or up here. So if I go to Spanish 2, I used this last time too. I can delete that. I did week by week. I made this in Canva for what was going on. We did learning reflections, and I also did, I had promised my kids some food days. Well, we ended up making those virtual. So I used Canva, used those images and put them in here to make everything look better. But I was able to put links to all of the Google Forms and things they needed to fill out. Everything for my students, very easy to, here's a raft embedded here. Easy for my students and their parents to navigate, a very standard website. And it was easy for me to build. It took less time for me to upload everything here than it did to put everything on Google Classroom. I did it both because I had to, but it's easy. You can do it. It's not hard. So your turn. Go back to those performance tasks you made, even if it's mentally. You don't have to go back physically, but go back mentally and think about what tool or tools would you encourage your students to use to complete those tasks in a digital environment. As I'm thinking about, back to Krishna's again example, he had originally said make a Flipgrid video. However, JCPS really doesn't want us using Flipgrid. So maybe a different video platform could be just make a video using the video platform of your choice. So if a student already had a TikTok, they could make a TikTok. If a student had a phone, they can just record a video on their phone and upload it. It's not a big deal.